We're going to take a look at a build of Kinnan and some of the cards that you will see in a common cEDH deck. Kinnan is usually built around one of two things, either big flips or big mana and getting extreme value out of that. Kinnan allows you to have your non-land permanents tap for additional mana, which is nice, and it has a second ability that for 5 generic and green and blue, you can look at the top 5 cards of your library and put a non-human creature card from among them onto the battlefield and the rest in the bottom in any order. So usually Kinnan generates mana over the course of the game, activates, and then hopefully reveals a creature and gets value from doing that. We are going to take a look at some of the creatures and the ways that this deck is built. We do run one battle, and that is Invasion of Ikoria, and that's because simply it is a tutor for us for 2 green and X. We can search our library and our graveyard for a non-human creature card with mana value X or less and put it on the battlefield. The nice thing is, if we attempted to go for one of our big payoffs and then it got removed, we can get it out of our graveyard, which is why Invasion of Ikoria is so good for our deck. We have one Planeswalker, which is Tezzeret the Seeker. Tezzeret is here mainly for its negative X ability, but the +1 is not bad either to untap 2 target artifacts, so you can make a little bit of extra mana with it, but mainly we use Tezzeret to go search using its -X, and we search for a artifact card with mana value X or less, put it on the battlefield. Usually we're searching for Basalt Monolith, but depending on where we are in the game, we might search for something else. And then it's -5 artifacts we control become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 on a turn. We're not really worried about that part of it. It's okay, but we're not really built around being an artifact heavy deck where this is actually super relevant to us. Let's take a look at the creatures that Kinnan runs a lot of the time and why they use them. A lot of Kinnan decks have cut Walking Ballista. However, I personally choose to leave it in the deck. I have won off the Walking Ballista more than not. Now, a lot of Kinnan players will say you don't need that if you have ways of making infinite mana. There's plenty of other ways in your deck to win, and there are. But I have won more often than the Walking Ballista than not. So I personally still keep it in my deck. Armored Scrapforger just is value for us because we do get to add mana of any color. We get to tap it and exile a card from a graveyard. So it's helping us to remove things out of people's graveyards. Bloom Tender is nice because eventually Bloom Tender could tap for 3 mana. It could tap for green and blue and then 1 more. Gilded Drake could help us steal something from one of our opponents, gain some value from that. Phantasmal Image can become a copy of a creature, so if one of our opponents has like a Dockside or something, then we can have it become a Dockside. Stoneward Packbeast is here to help us filter. For 2, we can add 1 mana of any color, but with Kinnan we're essentially adding 2, so this turns all, if we can make infinite colorless mana, this turns all of our colorless mana into colored, so this helps us filter our mana if we need it at that point. Thrasios is here because as part of our win con, if we pay 4, we can scry and reveal a top card. If it's a land, put on the battlefield tapped, otherwise we draw. So if we make infinite color mana or colorless, we can then infinitely go through our deck and get to what we need. Endurance helps us get something back out of our graveyard if we lost it, but it's also great to endurance somebody else, especially if they are about to win with the Thassa's Oracle combo. You can endurance them if they've got a couple cards in their graveyard, and then they won't necessarily win off the Thassa's Oracle combo. You do that in response to the trigger of Thassa's Oracle, so that Thassa's Oracle has already resolved. Manglehorn is a piece of removal for us, but it then slows our opponents down by making their artifacts come in tapped. Spellseeker, some Kinnan lists run, and some Kinnan lists do not. I personally like Spellseeker because it's going to go help me grab an instant or sorcery card with mana value 2 or less. This could be a counter. This could be Cyclonic Rift. This could be Muddle the Mixture. It all depends on where I am at that moment and what I need. It's very versatile and it helps me get several options. Trophy Mage is also a card that some lists run and some do not. It's mainly to tutor up the Basalt Monolith in our deck. Phyrexian Metamorph is nice because it can come in and copy another artifact or creature. So if something our opponents has as we want, we can copy it. Seedborn allows us to untap during each other player's untap steps, which means if we've got the mana, we can activate Kinnan on their upkeep and maybe get some nasty things before they really have a chance to do much about that. Wandering Archaic, which seems like a lot for 5 mana, actually is huge for us because a lot of times our opponents can't pay or won't pay the 2 so that we don't copy the spell. And if they do pay the 2, that's actually good for us because the chances are it's slowing them down. They're not comboing off that turn like they would have. And if they don't pay, we get to copy whatever it is, and sometimes that's good, especially if they're tutoring. Consecrated Sphinx is just a nice old creature for us. It's good card draw. Colossal Sky Turtle has made its way into several Kinnan decks, and it's not really because it's a creature, the fact that it's a 6/5 or flying, or that it has War 2. The real reason that it's making it into a lot of Kinnan decks are because of the channel abilities. And so we can use the second channel ability for a blue and a generic, discard the Colossal Sky Turtle to return a creature to its owner's hand. If we want or if we need to, it's a creature we can play, or we can rip it off the top with a Kinnan activation, so it's versatile for us. It's a 2-for-1 card. The second channel ability is usually what it's for. The first channel ability to pay a green and 2 generic, discard it, return target card from your graveyard to your hand is also useful, but it's not something that we're going to do very often. But because it has really 3 uses in this deck, it's a 3-for-1, it's a great addition to Kinnan. Hullbreaker Horror is one of our combo pieces. We can make infinite mana with Hullbreaker Horror and a couple 0 or 1 drops, and we go mana positive, and then we just start bouncing everything of our opponents. Nezahal is an oldie but goodie in Kinnan. It's been around for a long time. It's a big beater. It helps us to draw cards. It has protection built in because we can discard 3 cards to exile it and return it to the battlefield on the next end step. Tidesprout Tyrant is similar to the Hullbreaker Horror, except Hullbreaker Horror does not allow us to bounce lands. The Tidesprout Tyrant does. So we could really, if we get to that point, literally bounce everything of our opponents. Void Winner is the card that says your opponents can't even. 0 would be even, so it makes it hard for them to block with creatures that have even mana cost and cast spells, which shuts off a lot of combos in cEDH. Those 2 mana spells no longer work, like, unfortunately, no Docksides. Our sorceries are pretty light in the deck, but they all are very functional. Finale of Devastation, we can go grab whatever creature we need. We can grab a Mana Dork if we really need it, or we can go grab Tidesprout or wherever, depending on how much mana we have in the deck at that moment. Fabricate lets us go get an artifact. A lot of times we're fabricating for either Energy Refractor or we're fabricating for Basalt Monolith, but we could maybe fabricate for a Mana Rock if we need it. Time Twister just helps us refill our hand. Hopefully we're not more punished because we're refilling other people's hands too. Instants are pretty standard, what you would expect. There are a couple like Crop Rotation that we use to help us later in the game filter through our lands. Spell Snare is a personal favorite of mine. It's not played in a lot of decks, but I think honestly it should be played in a lot more cEDH decks than it is. And that's because it hits any spell with converted mana cost 2, which in cEDH is probably 50% of the combo pieces. So for 1 mana, you hit 50% of the combo pieces. That's a win for me. I personally love it. I think it's very underplayed. Muddle and Mixture helps us tutor or as a counter, depending on where we are. Mindbreak Trap is just good because if someone's comboing off, you can pay 0 and you can exile the entire stack. Shared Summons in Kinnan is really versatile because we can go grab 2 creature cards with different names and put them into our hand. So we could grab Seedborn Muse, or Tidesprout Tyrant, or a Mana Dork and something else, whatever it is that we need. We do have to reveal them, but it is helping us set up. Artifacts, of course, in Kinnan we have tons of Mana Rocks, but we run certain things like Springleaf Drum to help us get some value out of our creatures. Energy Refractor is similar to our Stonework Pack Beast in that it's a way to filter our colorless mana into colored mana. Moonsilver Key allows us to go search for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic land. Basalt Monolith is one of our combo pieces with Kinnan and Basalt Monolith. This equals infinite colorless mana because Kinnan would allow this to tap for 4 and you pay 3 to untap it, so you net 1, which in turn turns into infinite colorless mana. Mirage Mirror is in some Kinnan lists and not in others. It is run in mine because I like to be able to copy things, and being able to do something that's my opponent's is nice. I get a lot of value from doing that. The One Ring has found its way into most of my cEDH decks. No matter where I'm playing this, it always has performed. Whether I'm playing it in the beginning of the game, the middle of the game, or even towards the end of the game, it's just very powerful. And yes, it's 4 mana, which is at the top of our mana curve for our artifacts, but 4 mana, it really puts in a lot of work, especially early game, and Kinnan has no problem generating mana, so really the 4 mana in Kinnan is nothing. Enchantments, of course, we're going to run the 2 Draw Buddies, Mystic Remora, and Rhystic Study. We are still running Sylvan Library in our deck. I know a lot of decks cut Sylvan Library and slotted in the One Ring. I still like both because of the redundancy factor. That gives me 2 ways of being able to draw cards in my deck, and to me it's worth it still. In future builds, we may cut Sylvan Library out for some other card, but right now, I still do appreciate having the Sylvan Library. Our lands, we only run 27 of them. Notable lands would be Boseiju, because it's a removal or it's a land depending on where we are. Gaia's Cradle, we're going to be playing not a ton of creatures, but enough that Gaia's Cradle is relevant. And so with that, we're going to be able to add usually 2, 3, maybe 4 mana, which is not bad at all for Kinnan. Otawara is either a land or removal as well. Treasure Vault, we can sack it if we're at a certain point in the game, and we can end up making a large amount of mana with those treasures that we have because of Kinnan. So we could turn a couple lands that we had into, when we sacrifice the Treasure Vault by dumping our mana into it, into maybe 4 or 5 treasures, which in turn is double the mana because of our treasures tapping for an additional mana with Kinnan. Urza Saga is here not mainly because it's a land, but it does a couple things for us. We could make the construct, depending on where we are in the game, gives us a blocker, gives us something to attack with, or when it gets to the 3rd ability, it combos off with it quite nicely because we can go grab a lot of options from our 0 or 1 drops. It's not just Soul Ring, we have tons of 0 drops that we can grab. So depending on where we are in the game, there's actually in Kinnan a lot of options we can grab from the Moxes, the Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, and have more mana to us, which for Kinnan, the more mana, the faster we go. Generally speaking, the better. If there are other cards that you recommend in Kinnan or you've tried out, let us know how they worked in your favor or what your experiences are playing them. If you've played against Kinnan or played with Kinnan, we'd also love to hear how that's gone for you. Let us know in the comments below.